Welcome back to another exciting edition of Rhyme Signatures, where it's album ranking time once again, where I'm absolutely certain that every single human being in existence will agree with my positioning of these records, and no accusations of controversy or baiting will be made against me whatsoever. Naivety aside, Haken is one of those few bands who I genuinely don't feel have a single bad album to their name. Sure, I prefer some to others, that's why I'm doing a ranking video after all, but nothing on this list I consider to be a bad album. So, now that we've got that little disclaimer out of the way, let's get right on into the rankings as we start at number 8. It's Virus. So Virus felt like the natural continuation of Vector, but while it expands on the concept with bigger soundscapes and more developed themes, I felt it never quite hits the highs that Haken are capable of. Now, the album has moments of sharp brilliance, of course. The sprawling multi-part epic of Messiah Complex is as technically dazzling as anything in their catalogue, with plenty of delightful leitmotifs for fans to gobble up, but the execution sometimes felt a little too clinical. Now, with that being said, the band's technicality remains unmatched. Richard Henshaw and Charlie Griffith's twin guitar assault, combined with Diego Telleda's layers of synths, give Virus a dense, mechanized atmosphere that fits the narrative of paranoia and manipulation. Ross Jennings' vocals cut through with clarity, though his melodies often sit in the background, overshadowed slightly by the instrumental muscle. It's an album that rewards repeated listens, of course, but the rewards come mostly in appreciating the craftsmanship rather than being swept up in any kind of emotional investment. Conceptually, tying Virus into Vector gave the album a compelling framework, continuing the story of psychological trauma and institutional corruption. However, the narrative occasionally feels bogged down, with lyrics that try a little too hard to be ominous without reaching the poetic flair of Visions or the emotional honesty of The Mountain. The darker palette sometimes becomes monotonous, making stretches of the record blur together despite the complexity of the arrangements. Now, overall, Virus is still a strong release by the band's standards, but given Haken's usual level of inventiveness, it feels more like a consolidation than an evolution. It's heavy, precise, and technically mind-blowing, but it lacks the spark of wonder that defines their very best works. Okay, number 7, here comes the hate. It's Fauna. Okay, with Fauna, Haken returned after a few years away with a more eclectic, exploratory sound, moving away from the metal and industrial tone of both Vector and Virus. The animal-themed concept allowed the band to indulge in a range of metaphors and broader themes of humanity and survival, which gave Ross Jennings a lot of creative space lyrically. Songs like The Alphabet of Me and Love Bite showcase Haken's poppier sensibilities alongside their prog mastery, and while this lighter, more playful side could have driven a wedge in the fan base, it certainly proved that the band was willing to take some risks. Musically, Fauna feels looser and more colourful than its predecessors. There's an energy and an unpredictability that keeps the record engaging, with sudden stylistic detours that recall early Haken's willingness to experiment. The production gives each track breathing room, letting riffs and synth lines sparkle instead of being buried under layers of density. Jennings here sounds revitalized, pushing his vocal range into more expressive and experimental territory that matches the album's playful yet reflective nature. However, I don't know, not all of these experiments land as equally as each other. The album can feel uneven in places, with some tracks leaning too far into quirkiness at the expense of cohesion. Fans expecting the emotional resonance of Visions or the grand narrative scope of Aquarius may find Fauna a bit slight by comparison, even if it is still musically adventurous. Still, it's hard not to admire a band so many years into their career still stretching their boundaries the way they have on this one. In the end, Fauna stands as an intriguing oddity in Haken's catalogue. It's not their most consistent record, but it's one of their boldest, and it succeeds in reminding listeners that prog isn't just about technical chops, it's about imagination. Okay, number 6, we're going with Vector. Vector was Haken at their most concise, sharp, and aggressive. Coming in at around 45 minutes, it's their shortest studio album by quite some margin, and it wastes no time diving into jagged riffs, crushing rhythms and unsettling themes of psychological horror. The opening salvo of Clear Into the Good Doctor sets the tone perfectly with a theatrical flair that feels like a twisted rock opera compressed into 2 tracks. The album's raw intensity is both its strength, but also kind of its limitation. Musically, the band dialed up the heaviness, flirting more overtly with djent and metalcore textures while still keeping their signature prog identity intact. The rhythm section, Ray Hearn's drumming in particular, sounds monstrous, giving songs like Puzzle Box and Veil a ferocity rarely heard in Haken's earlier catalogue. At the same time, Diego's synth work injects an eerie, almost sci-fi atmosphere, heightening the unsettling mood. Yet, for all of its power, Vector sometimes feels more like a prelude than a fully realised statement. At its best, it's thrillingly intense, and at its weakest, it feels like the band are prioritising impact over depth. The concept of mental health and psychological manipulation is compelling, but the narrative feels underdeveloped, and the brevity of the record means some ideas don't get the space they really deserve. Even so, Vector is an important entry in Haken's evolution. It showed that the band could distill their complex songwriting into something leaner and meaner without losing their identity. While not their most definitive work, it's a fascinating left turn that set the stage for the sprawling continuation in the aforementioned Virus. Okay, number 5, we are going with Enter the Fifth Dimension and Restoration put together. Right, shut up. Before you all start getting huffy about it, yes, I'm including these in the ranking, and yes, I'm counting them together. My list, my rules. No, I am not taking any further questions on the matter. Before Haken were an established name in progressive metal, they released their original demo, Enter the Fifth Dimension, later partially reimagined as the Restoration EP. These early compositions reveal the DNA of Haken's sound: long-form storytelling, wild stylistic shifts, and a fusion of technical precision with theatrical flair. Even in these embryonic stages, the band's ambition was evident, as tracks like Blind and Snow, the latter especially in its restored form of Crystallized, showcased sprawling structures that rivaled anything in the genre back in 2008. The restoration versions of some of these tracks polished the rough edges and gave them the modern production sheen they really deserved, even if I don't always fully agree with some of the songwriting choices in the updated versions. What stands out most, though, is how fully formed Haken already were at this point. The balance between heaviness, melody, and whimsy, something that would define albums like Aquarius and Visions, are already in place, making these songs feel less like early sketches and more like hidden gems that finally received their due. Of course, compared to the band's later masterpieces, these tracks can feel overly indulgent or uneven, and the production on the demo is sloppy at best. The band was still figuring out how to rein in their impulses, and the genre hopping sometimes feels abrupt rather than seamless. But the sheer creativity on display is undeniable, and in retrospect, it's thrilling to hear what the foundations of Haken would become. Enter the Fifth Dimension and Restoration aren't just curiosities, they're a crucial piece of Haken's story. It shows the fearless ambition of a band with their sights set on prog greatness even before they had the resources or experience to fully realise it. Okay, we're down to number 4 with Affinity. Affinity was Haken's love letter to the 1980s, but it was done with the sophistication and creativity that only they could bring to the table. The retro synth tones and neon-inspired aesthetic give the album a unique flavour in their discography, standing apart from the esoteric fantasy of Visions or the emotional weight of The Mountain. Tracks like 1985 are an absolute riot of nostalgia, blending arena rock swagger with prog metal intricacy, while still sounding unmistakably modern. The clever use of vintage synth textures alongside heavy riffs makes Affinity one of the most stylistically adventurous works to date. The centerpiece of the album is, of course, The Architect, a towering 15-minute epic that demonstrates the band at the height of their compositional powers. It flows through crushing djent-inspired passages, soaring melodies, and eerie ambient interludes with complete assurance, cementing itself as one of Haken's finest songs. Ross Jennings delivers one of his most commanding vocal performances here, alternating between haunting, restraint, and explosive power. Now, the track also features guest vocals from Einar Solberg of Leprous, but I'm going to be real with you guys here. I genuinely feel like his contribution here detracts from the music rather than enhancing it, giving us what I feel is one of his very few duff performances. It simply doesn't fit. Elsewhere, songs like Initiate and Lapse balance accessibility with complexity in a way few bands can manage. Initiate is one of Haken's most direct and emotionally resonant songs, opening the record with a brooding intensity with a satisfying punch to it. Meanwhile, Earthrise channels an almost pop sensibility with a chorus that feels like pure joy wrapped up in prog finesse. The band's versatility shines here, proving they can write earworms without losing their adventurous edge. Now, while some critics felt Affinity lent a little too heavily on its retro gimmick, the execution is so strong that it never feels like parody. Instead, it's a bold, colourful chapter in the band's history, and one that demonstrates their ability to reinterpret influences and make them entirely their own. Affinity may not have the sprawling grandiosity of Visions or the raw heart of The Mountain, but it remains a fan favourite for a good reason. It's just pure fun without sacrificing any of the band's characteristic depth. We're going with number 3 now, with The Mountain. The Mountain is often regarded as the turning point in Haken's career and is very often cited as their true masterpiece. It's the album that transformed them from promising newcomers into one of the most important bands in progressive metal. It is a record full of raw vulnerability, grandeur, and boundless creativity. The metaphor of the mountain as a symbol of life's struggles and triumphs gives the record an emotional through line that ties everything together, even in its most eclectic detours. From the thunderous early hit of At the Stone to the heart-wrenching closer Somebody, this is Haken at arguably their most human. What makes The Mountain stand out is its balance between technical brilliance and emotional storytelling. Cockroach King has become iconic and a favourite in a live setting, not just for its Gentle Giant-inspired vocal counterpoint and playful quirkiness, but also for the way it fits into the larger tapestry of the album's themes of perseverance and self-discovery. It's equal parts tongue-in-cheek and musically daring, encapsulating the duality that defines Haken's approach to progressive metal. On the other hand, tracks like Falling Back to Earth and Pareidolia showcase the band's ability to write songs of immense scope and atmosphere. Falling Back to Earth in particular is one of their most cinematic achievements, combining moments of delicate beauty with passages of overwhelming intensity. Ross Jennings' vocal performance here is staggering, carrying both vulnerability and strength in equal measure. The Mountain is clearly Haken's statement of heart. It showed that prog metal could be as emotionally powerful as it is technically dazzling. For many fans, this remains the emotional centerpiece of their catalogue and the album that best captures the essence of what makes Haken such a special band. Right, at number 2, we've got Aquarius. With Aquarius, Haken arrived on the scene fully formed, and the prog world took notice. It's rare for a debut to feel this confident, this adventurous, and this complete, but Aquarius delivered in spades. A sprawling 73-minute concept album out of Mermaid, Outcast, and humanity's hubris, it blended high fantasy with searing emotional truths, setting a precedent for the band's future storytelling abilities. Musically, it pulled from the full prog playbook: symphonic flourishes, jazz interludes, crushing metal riffs, and heartfelt balladry, oftentimes all within the same bloody track. Songs like Celestial Elixir and Aquarium are epics that demonstrate the sheer scope of Haken's ambition. The former closes the album with an emotional catharsis that feels both devastating and uplifting, while the latter is a masterclass in dynamic composition, moving from tender passages to apocalyptic crescendos absolutely seamlessly. These tracks make it clear that Haken were never afraid to go big, even at the risk of overwhelming first-time listeners. The whimsical side of the band also shines here. Tracks like Drowning in the Flood and The Point of No Return have these sudden shifts into ragtime, circus-like theatrics and over-the-top melodies that might seem completely absurd on paper, but are executed with such confidence that they become thrilling. That theatricality, paired with their technical mastery, gave Haken an identity all of their own. While later albums may have refined their approach, Aquarius remains a landmark in modern progressive metal. It's unapologetically excessive, sometimes chaotic, but always compelling. You never forget your first time with Haken, and as this was mine and something of an obsession over the years, it was really hard for me not to rank this one as the top spot. But for number one, there's only one left after all, it can only be Visions. Visions, for me at least, is the crown jewel of Haken's discography, a sprawling, ambitious and emotionally devastating masterpiece. Where Aquarius introduced the band's wild ambition, Visions sharpened it into something cohesive and slightly overwhelming. The 22-minute title track alone is a career-defining achievement, one of the great modern prog epics, but every song on this album carries weight and purpose. It's an album obsessed with mortality, fate, and the fragility of life, and it delivers these themes with an intensity that lingers long after the music is finished. Tracks like Nocturnal Conspiracy and Deathless perfectly encapsulate the band's ability to merge storytelling with musical grandeur. Nocturnal Conspiracy feels like a gothic nightmare put to music, with moments of eerie calm giving way to terrifying crescendos. Deathless, on the other hand, is one of the band's most tender songs, a ballad that strips away technical fireworks in favour of pure emotional resonance, and it is one of Ross Jennings' finest vocal performances to date. Instrumentally, this is Haken firing on all cylinders. The interplay between the guitars and keyboards is frankly mesmerizing, with Diego's symphonic and cinematic textures elevating the band to new heights. The rhythm section grounds the chaos with remarkable precision, whilst Jennings delivers a vocal performance that is both theatrical and extremely personal. It's this marriage of technical wizardry and emotional depth that makes Visions so extraordinary. I mentioned earlier in the video that The Mountain feels like the beating heart of Haken's discography, and if we are going to make these comparisons here, then Visions is surely the soul. It's dark and grand and utterly uncompromising, a towering achievement in progressive metal that not only cemented Haken as leaders of the genre, but also set a standard few of their contemporaries could match. For many fans, myself included, this is not just Haken's best album, it's one of the defining prog albums of the 21st century. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go and put the title track on and scream along to it at an annoying volume to keep the neighbours up. So, there we go, my official, totally legit, not at all controversial ranking of the Haken albums. If you've made it this far without wanting to have terrible things happen to me for ranking the demo album above Fauna, then whew! You are a stronger person than most. But enough about me. What's your ranking? Where have I absolutely bloody missed the mark? Is Virus your favourite? Awesome, let us know about it. If you think The Mountain sucks, be brave and speak your mind. If you did make it all the way to the end, guys, thank you very much indeed for watching. Your support genuinely means the world to me, and you make me want to keep doing this video malarkey well into my 90s. If you did like the video, please do drop it a thumbs up, please do tell your friends about little old me, and please do consider subscribing to the channel if you've been enjoying the content so far. But until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures pretty odd.